people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar with tongs.
And he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sin purged. Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me.
And he said, Go and tell this people, keep on hearing but do not understand, keep on seeing but do not perceive.
And of course, Jesus would use that in quoting in one of his messages. Just as we were reading this, something just really jumped out at me. In verse 3, this is not what we're focusing on, I just thought I'd bring it out, is what these seraphim were crying, not just holy, 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 that is the Lord of hosts, but the whole earth is filled with his glory.
Full of glory.
Now, even now. Right? And yet, man's blind to that. The glory of his creation.
Yep.
The glory of so many aspects. It's filled with it. And that just is such a description of the blindness of man. He's dead to it. He can't. He's oblivious to it. And he has to attribute it to something, right? So he attributes it to evolution. But let's go back. King Uzziah, if we were to go back in Kings, we would see he was a decent king. He did some good stuff. And as the tendency is, when things are going well and there's a good leader, we don't look to the Lord as much, right? And so it wasn't until he was out of the picture that Isaiah was taken up into the presence of the Lord, and he saw the Lord high and lifted up. And of course the seraphim, I mean, try to imagine the sight, it's certainly unimaginable.
Yeah.
And yet as he saw the Lord, what effect did it have on him?
Undone.
It was undone.
Undone. Humbled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before the Lord. And he realized not just his own condition, a man of unclean lips, but he realized the condition of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Dwells among a people of unclean lips. But I love the order, because we have a tendency to see the sin in others, right?
Yeah.
But we don't see it in ourselves. And that's not the place we ever want to be, because we're all in the same boat. And so he first saw it in himself, and then he realized that he was one of many, one of everybody else. But that opened the door for God to cleanse him, to forgive him. There was acknowledgement. And then that led to him being able to hear the call of God. There's an order there. You really can't, I mean, you might read it, you might have some understanding of it, but until you're humbled before the Lord, you really don't hear it. I mean, Paul didn't hear it, right, till he was humbled on the road to Damascus, and countless others as well. Moses, God put it on his heart to let the people go, but he did it how? In his own way, and he failed miserably. And then 40 years later, after being broken, being humbled, God shows up and he doesn't think he's the guy for the job. Good place to be, for sure. One other place, let's turn to Job, chapter 40. Taught on this a while ago, but there's one aspect here that I didn't spend a lot of time on because of time. But there's a danger for us. Job, by God's testimony, was a righteous man, and then he started to suffer, and not just by Satan, but also by the hands of his friends, and then he tried to defend himself, which led to a greater problem. And that's a lesson for us. And because as he was defending himself, he began to say some things that he would have been better off not to say, which we need to watch out for, right? Let God be your defense. And then after about 30 chapters, God shows up on the scene and confronts Job. And when that happens, look at chapter 40, verse 1. Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He that reproveth God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay my hand upon my mouth. And I'm sure each one of us can think of numerous times where we wish we would have done that, right? I don't want to go there. It's too depressing. But just shut up, right? And verse 5, once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. Then answered the Lord unto Job out of the whirlwind and said, gird up thy loins now like a man. I will demand of thee and declare thou unto me. And if this verse isn't marked in your Bible, you really should, especially as you witness to people. Okay? Because this is man's propensity. Will you disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me that thou mayest be righteous? And how often that happens. Condemning God, judging God, sitting in judgment of God in order to make ourselves right. What a big mistake that is. Well, anyway, that's the necessity, and to keep ourselves there, to remain there in the presence of the Lord, to grow in humility, not to maintain, because there's an ongoing need to grow in humility. That almost sounds like contradiction in terms, right? Grow, humility. But you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Well, what I want to look at tonight is that of giving God all. Giving Him our best. Okay? And we're going to begin by looking at God. What did God give? Well, He gave His Son. And that was the best. Okay? For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. And as we turn our attention from that to Jesus, well, what did Jesus give? Well, He gave Himself. He gave His all for us. He gave everything.